In the blistering heat of the Arizona Territory, where the sun scorched the earth like an unrelenting forge and the wind whispered secrets through the sagebrush, a lone rancher named Elias Thorne rode his weary horse along the jagged rim of Crimson Canyon. The day had been ordinary until it wasn't, until he heard the faint, desperate cry echoing from the ravine below, a sound that pierced the silence like a knife through flesh. As he dismounted and scrambled down the rocky slope, his boots kicking up dust that choked the air, he found her, a young woman sprawled in the dirt, her once modest dress torn to shreds, bruises blooming across her pale skin like violent flowers. She clutched at the ground, her eyes wide with terror, whispering hoarsely to the heavens, "God, do not let them take me." Elias's hands trembled as he lifted the tattered fabric to cover her modesty, his heart shattering at the sight of her vulnerability, a stranger whose pain now became his own burden in the unforgiving Wild West. If this opening has already gripped your soul and you believe in the power of kindness and second chances, please hit that like button, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, share this video with someone who needs a reminder of humanity's light, and subscribe to Moments of Love for more stories that touch the heart. Elias Thorne was no stranger to hardship. He had carved out his ranch from the wild frontier with calloused hands and a spirit forged in loss. Years ago, he had buried his wife and infant son under a lone cottonwood tree after a fever swept through their homestead, leaving him a hollow shell of a man who spoke little and trusted less. The land was his only companion, vast and merciless, dotted with cattle that lowed in the distance and coyotes that howled at night. But on that fateful afternoon in 1872, as the sun dipped toward the horizon painting the sky in bloody hues, Elias's world tilted on its axis. The woman, whom he would come to know as Clara Hayes, lay there like a broken bird, her breaths shallow and ragged. She had been traveling west with a wagon train, seeking a new life after fleeing an abusive marriage back in Missouri, only to be ambushed by a band of ruthless outlaws known as the Blackthorn Gang. They had taken her companions, lives, her meager possessions, and nearly her dignity, leaving her for dead in the canyon's shadow. Elias, with gentle strength born of his own quiet grief, scooped her up in his arms, her slight frame weighing nothing against his broad shoulders, and carried her back to his ranch house, a modest adobe structure standing defiant against the endless plains. The days that followed were a blur of fevered nightmares and painstaking care. Clara's wounds were not just physical, the deep gashes from thorny bushes where she had hidden, the bruises from rough hands that had sought to claim her, but etched into her soul, a terror that made her flinch at every shadow and startle at the creak of the wind against the shutters. Elias tended to her with a tenderness he thought he had lost forever, brewing herbal teas from desert plants his late wife had taught him about, wrapping her in clean linens, and sitting by her bedside through the long nights as she murmured pleas in her sleep. He saw in her eyes the same haunted look he carried in his mirror each morning, a reflection of betrayal by the world. Yet, as he watched her slowly mend, stirring soups over the wood stove and mending her dress with clumsy stitches, Elias felt a stirring in his chest, a fragile hope that perhaps healing was possible not just for her, but for him. The ranch, once a place of isolation, began to echo with subtle signs of life, her soft footsteps on the creaky floorboards, the way she would gaze out the window at the starry sky, whispering thanks for the safety he provided without asking for anything in return. But the shadows of the past were not easily outrun in the Wild West, where justice was as scarce as rain and vengeance rode on horseback. Word spread through the dusty saloons of nearby Tombstone that the Blackthorn Gang was still prowling the territories, their leader, a scar-faced brute named Harlan Blackthorn, boasting of his conquests with a laugh that chilled the spines of even the hardest cowboys. Elias knew they would come looking for loose ends. Clara's survival was a threat to their impunity, a witness who could point fingers in a courtroom if the law ever caught up. His own challenges mounted as rustlers began targeting his herd, perhaps emboldened by rumors of his distraction, forcing him to ride out at dawn with his rifle slung over his shoulder, his body aching from sleepless nights. Clara, sensing his growing weariness, tried to help where she could, tending the garden with trembling hands, her spirit flickering like a candle in the wind. She confided in him during quiet evenings by the fire, her voice a fragile thread, about the dreams she once held of a peaceful homestead, now shattered by the violence that had stripped her bare. Elias, in turn, shared fragments of his sorrow, the way the fever had stolen his family, leaving him to question if God had abandoned the frontier altogether. Their shared pain wove them together, a tentative bond forming amid the dust and desolation, but the fear lingered, a constant undercurrent that made every creak in the night feel like impending doom. As weeks turned to months, the tension built like storm clouds gathering over the mountains. Elias fortified the ranch, nailing boards over windows and stocking ammunition, his hands blistering from the labor. Clara's strength returned in fits and starts. she would venture outside to gather wildflowers, pressing them between the pages of an old Bible Elias kept on the shelf, symbols of beauty reclaiming the barren land. Yet, nightmares plagued her, visions of rough hands and leering faces, and Elias would hold her through the tremors, his own heart racing with a protective fury he hadn't felt since his family's passing. The turning point came on a moonless night when scouts from the Blackthorn gang rode too close, their torchlight flickering like malevolent eyes in the darkness. Elias, rifle in hand, stood guard on the porch, his breath steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. Clara, no longer the broken figure from the canyon, joined him with a shotgun she had learned to load, her eyes fierce with determination. They didn't fire that night. The intruders slunk away into the shadows, but the encounter ignited a spark in both of them, a realization that survival demanded not just endurance but action. Elias began riding into town, seeking allies among the weathered sheriffs and fellow ranchers, piecing together a plan to confront the gang, while Clara found solace in small acts of defiance, like riding horseback across the plains, reclaiming her freedom one gallop at a time. The climax unfolded in the heart of Crimson Canyon, the same jagged scar in the earth where Elias had first found her. Harlan Blackthorn and his men, drawn by whispers of a bounty on Clara's head, ambushed a supply wagon Elias was escorting, their guns blazing in a symphony of chaos. Dust choked the air as bullets whizzed like angry hornets, and Elias fought with the ferocity of a man who had rediscovered his purpose. Clara, hidden in the rocks above, her torn dress long mended but the scars beneath still raw, provided cover fire, her shots precise from hours of secret practice. The battle was brutal, a whirlwind of shouts and smoke, with Elias taking a graze too. His shoulder that burned like fire, blood soaking his shirt as he pressed on. In the midst of the fray, as Harlan lunged toward Clara with a snarl, Elias intervened, tackling the outlaw to the ground in a desperate grapple. The canyon echoed with their struggle, rocks tumbling like thunder, until Elias, drawing on every ounce of his shaken resolve, subdued the leader, binding him with ropes as the remaining gang fled into the wilderness. The law arrived soon after, summoned by a flare Elias had lit, and justice, though tardy, claimed its due. Clara, standing amid the settling dust, looked at Elias with eyes brimming with gratitude and something deeper, a love born from shared trials, a second chance neither had dared to dream. In the aftermath, as the ranch bloomed under their joint care, cattle thriving, a new garden yielding fruits that tasted of hope, Elias and Clara built a life from the ashes of their pasts. The Wild West, with its endless horizons and unforgiving trials, had tested them to their cores, but in facing the darkness together, they discovered light. Elias no longer stared at the cottonwood tree with only grief. Now, it shaded picnics where Clara laughed softly, her spirit mended like her once torn dress. Their story became legend in the saloons, a tale of redemption whispered over whiskey, reminding all that even in the harshest lands, kindness could prevail, and second chances could rewrite destinies. As the sun set on their ranch, painting the sky in golden peace, they knew that God had heard her plea that day in the canyon, not by shielding them from pain, but by guiding them through it to emerge stronger, forever intertwined. If this story has touched your heart, stirring emotions of hope and resilience, please like this video, share it with those who need inspiration, and subscribe to Moments of Love. Your engagement means the world and keeps these tales alive. Before we end, I'd love to hear from you. Comment below with the line from the story that moved you most, and let's connect in the comments.